Hi, Dwayne Duggan, Remax of Boulder Video Podcast. Today we have Clif Harald from the Boulder Chamber. He's the director of the Boulder Economic Council. So, Clif, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, sure, Dwayne. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
You bet. Clif told me today that he has been in Boulder since like about 1971. 71, so that's getting me quite a while ago.
I mean, I'm an old timer.
Changed a lot.
Any minute now.
So I do remember that back in those days when I was getting my career started, Boulder wasn't really looking to promote business or draw business. So I find it interesting now that for the last maybe decade that there is a position such as yours. And it's pretty exciting to have you here, that we're actually out there looking for business. So thanks for being here today. Really appreciate it. So,
yeah, I do too. Thanks for the invitation.
So where are we in the Boulder economy right now? Is it growing or going down, or where are we at?
Well, I think I would be I know I would be surprised if you had viewers that did not think the Boulder economy was not only growing, but growing at a historic rate. Right. We are actually seeing economic indicators that we've never seen before in Boulder's economic history. I mean, we're seeing certainly the most obvious is median price of a single family detached home.
Which we have just done a show on that.
Yes, so I mean, those kinds of numbers are numbers we've never seen before in history. But we're also seeing vacancy rates in commercial real estate, retail, industrial, office vacancy rates that are, if not at historic lows, approaching historic lows. So we're seeing like 1% vacancy rates in retail space downtown, or 4% vacancy rates in office space throughout Boulder, and 2.5% vacancy rates in industrial space. These are, if not historic lows, they're bouncing right against it. And our unemployment rate right now is about 2.5% to 3%. Not historic low yet, but 2% is, so we're kind of flirting with that historic low as well. We're also seeing more money coming into Boulder. In the last couple of years, there's been about $3.5 billion in new capital invested in Boulder's economy and Boulder businesses. So these are the kinds of things that are really sort of indicators of just how robust our economy is today.
How about the number of cranes? That's what I use. You drive around town. You think back to 2012, before that, I mean, there was no cranes.
Right.
Now you drive around. It seems like there's cranes everywhere in Boulder, everywhere in Denver. So I don't know if you count them. You probably don't. But
well,
it is amazing.
It's the new city bird. Right? It is kind of astonishing, and people keep asking, what are those holes in the ground?
Right.
Because that's what they are right now. The two hotel projects and the Google project are big holes in the ground, and people are getting them confused, and they're wondering what's going to fill those holes. But the cranes are the most obvious sign.
Well, on Google there, when they first dug the hole, it rained a lot, so I called it like Google for a while.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. It is a big hole. It is huge.
It's like 4 stories deep.
It's a big campus. It's a big campus.
That's amazing. So we talk about sometimes like how big California's economy is compared to other countries.
Yeah.
How big is like Boulder's economy compared to like other cities in Colorado or other cities across the nation?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that question. There's a pretty significant, underappreciation of how big Boulder's economy is today. It wasn't always as big as it is. When you and I first moved here, it was pretty much a college town, and if you didn't work for IBM or didn't work for a lab or CU or some Valley Labs, some of the other companies that were here, you were leaving town. And most people in Boulder left town in the morning to go to work. We were a bedroom community of the metro area. That's totally reversed in the last few decades. And today, Boulder's economy is, I think, literally unique in terms of its size for a community of our size. And what I mean by that is we have about 100,000 jobs in Boulder, which is not a huge number in and of itself, but compared to the population that we have, which is also about 100,000, a little over 100,000, that ratio of kind of one job for every man, woman, and child in Boulder is unheard of. Right. I mean, I actually don't know of another community in the world that has that ratio of sort of 100,000 jobs, 100,000 people, or 1-to-1. And just to give your viewers a sort of comparison, the metro area, the Denver metro area, has about 3 million people and about 1.5 million jobs. Wow. So that's a good proxy for an average or a norm, is 2 to 1 like that. Fort Collins, which is a peer community of ours, has about 160,000 people and about the same number of jobs, about 100,000 jobs. So 1.5 to 1, which is very unusual. So for a community to have as large of an economy as we have, given the size of the community or a large economy as ours, is very, very unusual. The other thing that is very different and very unusual is how diverse we are. We have key industries across several different sectors, and it is a huge, huge kind of safety net for recessions when you have that much diversity. We're not so dependent on federal government spending on labs, or we're not so dependent on IT spend in investment. We have lots of different industries that are helping cushion us.
Okay, well, that's a great segue into what I was thinking next is who are the key industries today in our economy here?
So we focus on 6 key industries: aerospace, bioscience, clean tech, IT, of course, natural products, and outdoor recreation. Those are the industries that I spend most of my time focused on, trends in those industries, and most importantly, individual companies in those industries. You could talk about our research economy because CU and the federal labs, huge economic impact from those institutions that do some really interesting research. So we could talk about that as another economic or industry. And tourism, again, when you and I first moved here, Boulder was not a tourist destination. Today it absolutely is. 2.5 million visitors a year to Boulder every year. That's starting to compete with Rocky Mountain National Park. And the economic impact is $375 million a year from tourism. But those first 6 that I mentioned are really strong drivers, and we have some very obvious kind of Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 kind of companies in those industries, but we have an enormous number of startup companies in those industries as well. So we're not only diverse in terms of industry, but in terms of size.
Okay, and that's another perfect segue into what I was going to ask you next. Boulder's been a hotbed for entrepreneurship, for startups at a fairly high level. So what are some high-level startups that are coming to our neck of the woods here?
So let me tell you some stories about some successful startups, because many people in Boulder have forgotten that some of the best-known companies in the tech space, for example, natural products as well, are in Boulder not because they just had to be here, but because they acquired successful startups. So, one of the best examples is Google. Google is here because 10 years ago, this year, 2006, they acquired a company called Atlas Software. They probably had 20 people. They were doing some 3D image modeling, a company or a software called SketchUp. Google acquired them, and it's been moving forward ever since. But we have a number of stories like that. CA Technologies is here because they bought Rally Software. Twitter is here because they bought Gannett. NetApp is here because they bought SolidFire. Pinnacle Foods, which makes Hungry Man TV dinners, is here because they acquired Boulder Brands and Evol Burritos. And most recently, Hormel Foods, which makes Spam, is here because they acquired Justin's Nut
Peanut Butter.
So you can story after story after story of these kinds of acquisitions that are kind of really testimonials to the success of our entrepreneurial ecosystem here. But just a couple of other data points that I'll share with your viewers. The first is that in each of the past 2 years, Boulder startups have raised $250 billion in venture capital from venture capitalists around the country and in some cases around the world. That's a pretty significant number when you think that all of Colorado only raised about 750 or 780 million
that puts things into perspective, right?
So, almost 30% of all the venture capital raised in Colorado came to Boulder in each of the last 2 years. That's very significant. And then the last metric I'll share is that there's a nonprofit entrepreneurial think tank in Kansas City called the Kauffman Foundation, and they did a study a couple years ago of what they called high-tech startup density. So this is trying to get a handle on where is the highest concentration of startups. There are obvious locations with lots and lots of startups like Silicon Valley and Boston and other Seattle, other locations. but those are very large regions. They wanted to sort of put it on a per capita basis, on a proportional basis. What is the density of startup activity in these different regions
Right.
that are well known? Boulder came out #1 in the U.S. for the concentration of high-tech startups per capita in the entire
Wow,
U.S.
amazing.
And we have twice as high a concentration of startups as number two. Number 2 is Silicon Valley. So these are
There you go.
amazing. These are amazing metrics. Yeah.
That gives me goosebumps
I
just
know.
thinking about
It's
it.
astonishing. It's a little miracle that's
Right.
going on here right
And
now.
I think everything you've talked about, actually, we could have as a topic for some of our future shows.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
But one last question as we
Yeah.
close here. I think one of the most common questions we as realtors get asked is what the effect's going to be
Yeah.
of Google
Yeah.
being here. Because
Yeah.
as realtors, we're affectionately calling it the Google effect, because some
Right.
people are saying, oh, I'm just going to wait to sell my house
Yes.
once the Google effect kicks in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So any thoughts on that from your point of view?
So we could spend a whole show
Sure.
talking about this. There's a lot to think about here. And the first is that what I find very often is there's a misperception about Google in Boulder. Even the media will report that Google is coming to Boulder.
Right.
But I hear this all the time about well, when Google comes, or Google
Exactly,
is going to be
yeah.
here. As I mentioned, Google's been here 10 years. They grew from this startup company they acquired of 20 people to about 400 people today. And their new campus was approved for 300,000 square feet in 3 different buildings, and which would have a capacity of up to 1,500 people. So that's the 1,500 number
Right.
that you hear out there. The target right now is for occupancy of that first phase of that campus in fall, winter of 2017, so a little over a year from now. It is very significant in terms of the perception and the image it creates out there. That's part of the effect that you're talking about. But it also has some very real kind of material, concrete effects. I mean, there are people that are planning to move here because of the opportunities, either for jobs with Google or as suppliers or vendors
Sure.
of Google to be here. So we're starting to see some of that kind of secondary impact. I think we're probably starting to see some upward pressure on home prices because of that. Although there's so many other factors pushing those
Sure.
prices up that you know better
Right.
than I. Mostly a lack of supply, a
Right.
lack of inventory. But we are starting to see people making decisions about moving here or doing business here because of Google. And then I think really the most important thing is that Boulder already has a pretty strong image as a tech center, as an innovative center, as a progressive center. But Google is kind of a seal of approval on that. It's a
Right.
real affirmation of those things that we like to think about Boulder. Google had the option to go literally anywhere in the world. They certainly had the option to go anywhere in the metro area, and they were looking at options throughout the metro area when they made the decision to go forward with a big campus like this. And it was about a 4-year process. I was one of the very first projects I started on when I came into this role, and about 4 years later, they kind of doubled down on Boulder. So there are many, many dimensions here that we could talk about, but it is an astonishing affirmation of Boulder's kind of centrality in the whole tech world, and kind of unusual because the myth out there is that Boulder is really good at starting companies and getting
Going
them
someplace
up to a
else.
certain size, and then they have to leave.
Right.
Well, if there was ever a counter to that, it's
It's
Google.
happening right now. Cliff, thank you very much for
Of course,
sharing
Dwayne, thank you. I
insights, and
appreciate the
we'd love to have you
invitation.
back again.
Look forward to that.
Dwayne Duggan, Remax of Boulder Video Podcast, signing off.